Taiwan gets a new legislature, an Indigenous group hopes this will give them more power over their own affairs. A group celebrates a victory in a decades-long battle for recognition against the government. A film makes history as the first Taiwanese woman wins Best Director. And bringing history and culture to new audiences through dance. A warm welcome from Wulai, an Indigenous town about 30 kilometers away from Taiwan's capital, Taipei. We're here today for a special half-hour program to mark the Lunar New Year, looking back at important and inspiring stories over the past year involving Taiwan's Indigenous people. Up until the 17th century, Taiwan was mainly inhabited by Indigenous tribes, although now they only make up officially about 2% of the population. Many of them traditionally live in mountainous and isolated areas like this one. This year has been key on a number of fronts, from politics and film to paving the way for the recognition of more Indigenous groups. Let's start with politics. In August, Taiwan saw the launch of its first Indigenous Parliament. TaiwanPlus reporter Rick Lowett went to find out more.
Members of the Taiwan National Assembly take their oath of office in a small rural village in southern Taiwan. They hope this newly established legislature, made up of representatives from the Taiwan Indigenous group in villages and communities across southern Taiwan, can give them more power and control over their own affairs.
I think it's like to get together all the powers, all the voices from the different Taiwan communities to get together so they can bring our voices, even the little voices from the community to the world or to the Taiwanese government.
Taiwan is home to 600,000 Indigenous people. For centuries, they were mistreated, their lands taken away, and their culture and language repressed. After current President Tsai Ing-wen was elected in 2016, she issued an apology to Indigenous people and passed a law protecting and promoting Indigenous rights. Taiwan, of which there are about 100,000, is the second largest Indigenous group in the nation.
This is the first time Taiwan people have had their own formal legislative body, and is expected to be the largest Indigenous assembly in the country. The people elected here will discuss matters concerning the community, such as land, the local economy, and protecting Taiwan customs and languages.
But they also have a bigger mission: to encourage the government to recognise Indigenous people as the rightful owners of Taiwan and grant them greater autonomy.
我们成立民族议会 第一个最主要就是我们民族的地位要重新再确立。我们是台湾的主人，如果说包括外来的民族的话，我们也是长子，那我们必须要存在的地位跟实质的价值。那既然要有存在的地位，我们必须要走向民主自治的一个政治行政体系。
The original inhabitants of Taiwan have for years been treated like second-class citizens in their own homeland. But with the convening of this assembly, they hope one day to meet Taiwan's government on an equal footing. James Rayner and Rick Lowett in Pingdong County for TaiwanPlus.
Towards the end of 2022, local elections dominated Taiwan's news cycle. But while much of the attention was on Taipei and other cities, Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick travelled to the county of Hualien on the east coast, where a former presidential spokeswoman was vying to become the first Indigenous county chief.
Local elections in Hualien County on Taiwan's east coast can look a lot like they do anywhere else in the country. But this year, one name on the campaign posters stands out.
支持者，他告诉我说：“你的名字不要用罗马字，因为有一些汉人看不懂。”我只为了要赢得这场选举，却浪费了这个机会，大量的使用原住民的文字。那我认为这是不对的。非原住民他们要习惯花莲还有台湾有不同的族群。
Former lawmaker and presidential spokesperson Kolas Yutaka is hoping to make history in her home county. Here in Hualien, Indigenous voters make up a bigger proportion of the electorate than any other county in the country, about 5 times the national average. Yet they've never been led at that level by one of their own. But that could all be about to change. It's highly unusual for an Indigenous candidate to run for high office like county chief, a position chosen by all voters. They're more likely to throw their hats in lower-level races that are decided by other Indigenous people. It's a system that was put in place to benefit underrepresented ethnic groups. But some say its time has passed.
If you are Indigenous and you want to run for candidate, you have to go to Indigenous role. And if you are a voter, you can only vote for your Indigenous candidate only. So for us, this is really like apartheid policies.
The opposition KMT has held a firm grip on Taiwan's Indigenous constituencies ever since they governed Taiwan under single-party rule. But observers say this has more to do with personal relationships than political platforms. But this is gradually changing.
In these elections, more and more Indigenous candidates, they try to be non-party candidates. They don't really like to represent for DPP, but at the same time, they know they don't want to represent KMT as well. I think that is a new trend for Indigenous candidates to try to not to affiliate with any political parties.
Take Kolas Yotaka's campaign, for example. They've swapped the DPP's trademark green for red, the color of the Amis people.
有非常多的支持者勇敢地站出来，而且拿着麦克风告诉其他人说：我们作为阿美族，我们作为原住民，先于所有的一切。政党是后面的事情，所以希望让原住民族的族人跟孩子可以担任县长。我们在这次的选举里面啊，长久以来被压抑的伤口，或者是历史的伤痕，可以获得医治，而且获得安慰。
Win or lose, this race is bringing Indigenous candidates and issues closer to the mainstream of Taiwanese politics. Howard Zhang and Ryan Hokel-Patrick for TaiwanPlus.
Kolas Yotaka failed in her bid to win county chief, but her campaign did raise the profile of Hualien's Indigenous people, and she brought her party closer to victory in the county than ever before. Now, before we go any further, let's take a look at Taiwan's Indigenous peoples. The government recognizes 16. Here in Wulai, the Dayan dominate. They are traditionally known for face tattoos and weaving. More on that later. A museum in Wulai explains their culture, and there are shops in the old street that sell handicrafts, and restaurants serve Indigenous specialities like sticky rice served in bamboo and mochi, a dessert made from millet flour with fillings such as red bean and sesame paste.
这个是纯小米的，那普遍客家人都是用糯米做的麻糬，我们原住民是用小米做的，不一样。小米是黄色，糯米是白色的，不一样的颜色。炸猪葱，我们的本地的名产，好吃。我们高山好山好水的炸猪葱哈，有生气是好吃的。
Now elsewhere in Taiwan, there are other Indigenous groups that are still fighting for recognition from the government. In December, I went to visit members of the Saraya, a group in Tainan in Taiwan's south, who were celebrating a court victory that paves the way for them to finally have their identity recognized. singing an Indigenous celebration song, these children are rejoicing over a recent court victory for the Saraya people. A decades-old law that led to their exclusion from the official list of indigenous tribes has just been deemed unconstitutional, and the court has given the government 3 years to rectify it.
这个我们已经争取了20-30年哦，其实心里面是很高兴啦，很高兴，因为毕竟我们长期以来被忽略、被漠视、被边缘化，这个长期以来都是这样。
The Saraya are hopeful they will get the recognition they deserve after years of having to explain who they are.
我讲我西亚雅族，可是很多人都说啊，西亚雅族是什么？就是很多人都只有在课本上面听过，可是不知道这是什么族。
The Saraya are in school history books because they used to dominate the land in this part of western Taiwan, but their language and culture faded after the arrival of Han Chinese in the 17th century. Today there are at least 10,000 Saraya people living in Taiwan. After the celebrations, some of them meet with their lawyer to discuss the judgment and next steps. Taiwan's government put out a call in the 1950s for indigenous groups to register for official recognition. The Saraya failed to do so. Many of them said they didn't know they had to, but they've subsequently seen how recognition has benefited other groups. Taiwan officially recognizes 16 indigenous groups, and that status brings privileges such as scholarships and subsidies, efforts to preserve language and culture, and the ability to vote for indigenous legislators. But despite their victory in court, the Saraya's lawyer says it doesn't guarantee the group will eventually receive the same benefits as the others.
在取得身份这部分，绝对是西亚族人一定可以取得的。在这个身份之后，有多少权利，才是之后政治攻防的重点。
Most of Taiwan's recognized indigenous groups are from more isolated, mountainous areas, and the government has argued for years that the Saraya and other Plains people covered by the lawsuit are now too assimilated with Taiwan's majority Han Chinese population to deserve the same kinds of protections, and that they would take scarce resources away from others. The government official dealing with indigenous affairs says sorting out the issue will be complicated. There are about 10 groups covered by the lawsuit, collectively referred to as the Ping Pool.
不是很短时间就可以达成一定的共识，所以用3年的时间来做修法或者是立法。所以我们会利用这3年的时间，逐步盘点平埔族群他们客观的现状是什么，然后才决定他应该有的各种权利应该怎么样的保障。
But for some Saraya, recognition has come too late.
很多祖辈都等不及他的身份获得证明，他就过世了，这是我们比较可惜，有些长辈都看不到。
前进针都可以，对不对？对。
But their ancestors' traditions are surviving. As the Saraya wait for the government to make changes to the law, they are proudly passing on crafts and their way of life, happy that they're a step closer to having their culture recognized and their identity. Howard Zhang and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus. The Saraya have also, against all odds, brought back their language to life after 100 years of it not being spoken. Language is an integral part of anyone's identity, but some Indigenous languages are in danger of dying out. However, as Rick Glowett reports, Indigenous millennials are using social media to keep these languages alive.
YouTuber Sean Bulanyu is Paiwan, an indigenous group of Taiwan. At 19, he left his community to study in the capital, Taipei. He regularly travels back to his village to explore his culture and shares his experiences online.
我只是想要记录说我们的互动、日常生活，在部落有趣的事情这样子。然后后来做了以后才发现说， 其实蛮多在外面就是去市区生活的年轻人啊、孩子啦，他们会有这个需要，他们可以借着这个影片啊、频道，然后他们可以去回忆之前部落的生活，或者是说他们想家的时候。
Taiwan is home to nearly 600,000 indigenous people, about 2% of the island's population. For decades, indigenous people were treated like second-class citizens in their own home. They were constantly forced to relocate, and their languages were restricted in public spaces. Discrimination still exists, and many of these languages are at risk of dying out.
现在的政府已经采取了一些保护族语的措施，或是要去振兴族语的一些策略。那许多年轻人呢，也开始慢慢认同自己的语言。不过，尽管如此我们根据刚才我们提到的主计处的统计啊，在生活中实际使用族语的人口反而是减少的。
Young Indigenous Taiwanese are increasingly taking to social media and the internet to reconnect with and share their language and culture. Illustrator Umav Isbalakam records her language learning on Instagram and Facebook.
I'm from Bunun community. I am kids from Bunun tribe, but I set up this fans page not because I'm good at speaking my own mother tongue, because I'm very not good at speak in Bunun language. So I want to encourage myself and record the process that I'm learning in Bunun.
On popular social messaging app Line, the indigenous community have created stickers in their mother tongues.
社交媒体跟 LINE 的贴图对族语的宣传或是个人的语言态度的翻转是有帮助的。那因为过去族语被污名化就是被视为是一种原始的语言，落后的，不属于文明的语言。
Taiwan's indigenous people, along with their languages and cultures, were once pushed to the fringes of society. But indigenous millennials, using social media and online tools, are determined to reclaim their identity. Piper Yu and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
The government official in charge of Indigenous affairs told me that language is vital to communities' development. I sat down in December with Yijiang Baroth, Minister for the Council of Indigenous Peoples, who himself is part of the Amis tribe. Here's some of what he had to say.
那我觉得所有民族的发展语言是最根本的。如果没有了语言，那个迎新年的活动就不可能举行了，我们也不可能有阿美族每年的丰年祭，因为怎么讲，我们连讲都不会说的，你怎么会唱你的歌呢？你也不会跳你的舞啊。语言是我们民族的根本，如果没有了语言，我们这个民族，我们这个文化就不存在了。文化都不存在，台湾当然就不存在所谓的原住民族。
That was Yijiang Baroth of the government's Council of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous languages are increasingly appearing on Taiwanese screens. The language of the Dayan people appeared in a film that won accolades this past year, Gaga. Its director is the first Indigenous woman to be nominated for the Top Directing Award at the Golden Horse Awards, the Chinese language equivalent of the Oscars. Yvonne Yang brings us this report from November.
The movie Gaga opens by following an indigenous Dayan man as he journeys deep into the mountains of Taiwan. The man, Hayong, represents the older generation of Dayan people. He struggles to keep up with the changing world and chooses to continue living in a traditional way. He lives by a philosophy that the Dayan people call Gaga.
因为那是一整个人从生到死你要遵循的东西，那个东西很内化也很外显。我所谓内化就是道德规范，我所谓外显就是你不能偷东西，我们相信天上的祖灵会惩罚你。对，所以它就是一个大自然跟人跟土地的那一种生存的那种原则。
The film shows how these beliefs and ideals have struggled to survive in the modern age. Gaga centers around an election in a Dayan village where Hayong and his family live. When his oldest son decides to run for township chief, Hayong and his family try to help. But disputes arise, and eventually they break the family apart. Laha got the idea of using an election to tell this story 4 years ago. She saw how an actual election changed the way of life in an indigenous village.
其实外来的选举是破坏部落和谐最大的元凶之一，因为选举让一个部落本来是一个家就开始分裂，那甚至是一个家庭为了选举也分裂。然后因为以前我们是头目，也是世袭，所谓头目的领导者也是世袭的，今天该怎么做就是头目说了算，不是像现在这样子你争我夺，大家互相攻击，然后就是有很多不好的文化都进来。
Laha says that preserving traditional values is not a challenge for just the Dayan. Change, she says, can be difficult for everyone, but Laha still thinks that a shared bond of family and community can help people adapt.
所以我相信其他族群也有像嘎嘎一样的价值，因为家庭血缘的关系，你不可能就是仇恨到底，所以因为家，然后会让你有前进的动力。
Gaga is now showing in theaters in Taiwan. It's up for Best Narrative Feature, Best Director, and 4 other awards at the Golden Horse Awards this Saturday in Taipei. Damon Lin, Yvonne Yang, and Yujing Huang for TaiwanPlus.
And Gaga director Laha Meibo became the first Taiwanese woman, not just Indigenous woman, to win Best Director at the Golden Horse Awards. And now, staying with the Dayan, but moving on to dance. A Taiwanese troupe in August wrapped up a series of performances inspired by the movements of traditional Dayan weaving. Philip Brassard explains.
Dancers stomp and sway in time to songs of the Dayan, one of Taiwan's indigenous groups. This latest work from renowned dance troupe Bularayang mimics traditional Dayan weaving. It's called rustling, whirring in English, but jili dulu in Mandarin.
织布机的声音，撞声词嘛，然后我们翻译成中文之后，其实也蛮好的。就好像不管是文化或每一个人，在人的生命过程当中，靠自己嘛，然后度过很多辛苦等等。
The 7-year-old dance troupe, helmed by acclaimed choreographer Bularayang Pagalafa, aims to bring Dayan history and culture to new audiences. In Jili Dulu, images of the mountains that are home to the indigenous group are projected onto the dancers, giving visibility to a group who, like many of Taiwan's 600,000 indigenous people, were mistreated for decades.
它就比较没有舞台的东西，我把它舞台化，所以在呼吸上，在每个段落用声音表情去夸大一点。
With performances in both the north and south of Taiwan, Bularayang dancers are bringing new visibility to a once marginalized way of life. James Rayner, Rick Glauert, and Philip Brassard for TaiwanPlus.
And we end now with some sport, baseball. Yujing Huang travelled to Taidong on Taiwan's east coast in December to watch the Care Cup. It's a tournament that aims to help children from indigenous communities and remote areas pursue their baseball dreams. Let's take a look.
Team Colosio Current is about to win its first match ever at the Care Cup. We already know how this game will end. It's already 12-3. But still, the players, the coach, and the fans are thrilled when they win. It's a big deal for the team. They've traveled all the way from a small island, and it's a rare win for them. The team from Gongguan Elementary had to take a 15-minute boat ride just to get here. Green Island, where they live, has a small population. That means they rarely get to play against kids their own age, and that's what the Care Cup is all about. This year, the tournament starts with a special old boys game, where all of the participants are retired players. including some of the Care Cup's founders, like Zheng Xingsheng. Zheng is an indigenous Amis player. He invited some professional players with similar backgrounds to return to their roots. Lin Zhisheng holds the record for the most home runs in Taiwan's professional baseball league. To him, inspiring the next generation of players is important, and seeing the children play each year helps motivate him in his own games.
以后我要开始打棒球啊，你要打职棒啊。以后我老退休的时候，我打 OB 然后你就是来关怀小朋友，对吧？
The Colosseum current players are walking away today with more than just a win under their belt. They've also learned a lot from these pro players, like how to deal with defeat.
输球不要怕，因为打比赛就认真打，难出气的事，输了没关系，下一次认真就好。
Whether these children go on to become professional players or not, they've already caught the spirit of baseball. And that's what the Care Cup is all about. Alex Chen, BT Zhuang, and Eugene Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching this special New Year's show. I'm off now to go and enjoy some of that food we saw earlier. A very happy Lunar New Year from here in Wulai and from all the team at TaiwanPlus. And we leave you with images of a New Year festival from the Pinuyumayan people in eastern Taiwan. Goodbye.